Okay, good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I guess it's Wednesday today. All the days feel the same sometimes. Hope you're doing okay. If you're here in Vancouver, of course, you'll see it's nice and sunny outside, so that's pretty cool. Maybe we can get outside later today, get some sun. I hope. Okay, so who's here? Tika's here. Good morning to you. Jimmy's here. Good morning. Banamer's here. Good morning, Banamere. KC's here. Morning, KC. Duong, thank you for correcting that. I was a little worried when you when you, when you typed help. I was a little bit concerned, but it looks like it's just a hello. So, whew, I was close. Good morning, Duong. Good morning, Mashid. Karen's here. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, Erica. Good morning, Jenna. Um, so how many of us are here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. Well, as people trickle in, we'll get started here. Today we will talk about that TED Talk video that we saw yesterday. I'll just recap really quickly what we talked about yesterday with the music video thing. I have a video for you to watch called "What Stands in the Way of Women Being Equal." At least I think that's what it's called. Morning, Chan. Um, and I have some news to share with you, or I'd like to talk to you about a quiz next week, and I'd like to talk to you about the third micropaper and the final paper. I'd like to talk to you about all those three things today, but maybe we'll save that until after the break. Hopefully more people will be here, and then we can talk about it. Okay. So Baha, good morning to you. Okay, let's dive in. All right. So yesterday we were talking about discourses of sexism in music videos, and what I was trying to argue, and of course this doesn't apply to all music or all music videos, but sometimes we see gender-based narratives of domination and subjugation. So what I'm saying there is that sometimes we see very clear evidence of men's domination and superiority and women's submission and inferiority. Okay, and so we used Ariana Grande's Seven Rings to think about this a little bit. And again, that wasn't we weren't trying to criticize Ariana. Seems like a lovely young woman, phenomenal singer, but we just wanted to use her song and her video to highlight some of the things we were talking about. So no shade, Ariana. Everything's cool. And so we looked at the lyrics to this song, or some of the lyrics anyway. I know there's more. We looked at the lyrics to this song, and we kind of, I think, seemed to come to the conclusion that it was a bit of a female empowerment song. It was a song about independence and confidence and being able to, take care of yourself and buy the things that you want because you make your own money and you don't really need anyone to do that for you. And in particular, you don't need a man to do it for you as well. But when we moved on to the video, I was trying to argue, and I don't know if I successfully did. I don't know if you believed me or not. But I was trying to argue that we see kind of a different picture. We do see elements of that wealth and money that she talks about in the song. So we saw lots of diamonds. There's some diamonds there on her little cat ear things. We see lots of expensive, fashionable clothes. We see lots of champagne and things. And so we see symbols of the sort of wealth and commodities that she's talking about in the song. But the video is actually quite a bit different. And the video is different because of the sort of overt sexiness of it, right? So there's lots of sexy dancing. Ariana's crawling around on her hands and knees a lot of the time. And so the question is who's the video really for, and what message is the video sending? Because we know the song is sending one message. And what I was trying to convince you of is that the video itself is a little more made for the male viewer. I think we kind of agreed that the video is a house party with Ariana and her girlfriends, but it's not really the kind of house party that girls would fantasize about or think about. It's more of a guy fantasy. It's more of what guys might imagine that scenario to be like. And so I was trying to sort of compare this sort of song about female empowerment with the fact that the video is so much devoted to sort of performing in a sexual way for a male audience. And so the question I was trying to ask, and maybe I didn't ask it very well, but the question I was trying to ask is that, are those two things in opposition? Is she singing about one thing and then doing something totally different in the video? And is the fact that she's performing that way in the video, is that evidence of men being in the dominant group, that she's kind of she's required to perform that way in order to get men's attention? In order to sell records, she has to be overtly sexual. And again, the reason I point it out is because the song itself, the lyrics of the song, they're not very sexual. They're not really about, they're not about sexiness, they're not about romance, they're not about guys really. The lyrics are about her and her independence, but the video for the song is very, very sexy. And so the question was, is the fact that she's acting and dancing really sexy in the video, is that another way in which she empowers herself? Or is she required to do that in order to sell music? That's the tricky question, and it's not an easy one. I'm going to push pause on that question, and I'll come back to it in just a little bit, okay? I'll come back to it in just a little bit. But what I was trying to suggest here is that there's a lot of stuff in music videos today, and not so much. Good morning. Good morning, Baha, and good morning, Manish. One of the things I was trying to suggest is that there's a lot of evidence of sort of porn and stripper culture mixed into a lot of music videos today, and Ariana's is kind of not bad. It's not the sort of sexiest video that you would see out there, but lots of videos, particularly kind of rap and hip hop guys, sometimes they like to have videos that are set in strip clubs, and there's strippers crawling around and people are throwing money everywhere, and again, that's pretty clear evidence of sort of male domination of women, right? And sort of objectification of women. And most of those videos are written and directed by men. And like Karen rightfully points out here, label executives are men as well. And so if we look at Ariana Grande, the question is, does she have to present herself in such a sexy way in order to sell records? Is her record label requiring her to present herself that way? Or is she allowed to present herself however she wants, right? That's another question, and it's difficult to identify for sure, but I'm going to press pause on both of those and we'll come back to them, okay? But whatever's going on, whether Ariana is presenting herself in a super sexy way, if she's presenting herself simply because she wants to, or because her record label bosses are pressuring her to, either way, because her audience is so young in some cases, the effect is that young girls are kind of sexualized at earlier and earlier ages, and they sort of pay more attention to their body, their weight, their beauty, at a time they really shouldn't be doing that. There's there's girls out there who are 9 and 10 years old who are going on diets, and that's not really mentally healthy or physically healthy for them at that age. It's not healthy for them to be so concerned with their appearance when they're 9 or 10 years old, and it's definitely not a good idea for them to deprive themselves of food and nutrition when they are young and still active and still growing. So the sort of over sexualization of young women and young girls is actually a very concerning pattern. And again, this is where I will pick on Ariana a little bit, because she is being super sexy, but at the same time, she is, with all her sort of pinkness and girliness, she is, I think, catering to a younger audience. And so this is my opinion, but I would say, Ariana, if you want to be super sexy, you should sort of focus yourself on a more mature audience. And if you want an audience that's younger, that's fine, but you have to tone down the sexiness a bit, because young kids just shouldn't be dealing with that. But again, that's just my opinion. Okay, so we were talking yesterday, and I was trying to sort of tie these threads together for us. We were talking about misogyny, which is kind of a hatred or a prejudice toward women. We were talking about Harrison Ford's characters and their sort of predatory romance behaviors, and the sort of overt sexuality in music videos. And all of these kind of have to do with gender roles and rules and expectations about human sexuality, okay? And what I was saying yesterday is that, of course, we all have gender roles in our culture, right? There's different expectations for men and women in all cultures around the world, and of course, that extends to sexual behavior as well. Every culture has rules around sexuality, what sexuality is, how it can be expressed, if it can be expressed in public, and to what degree, who can have sex with whom. There's all kinds of rules around sexual behavior, and in some cultures, of course, they're very kind of loose rules, and there's lots of freedom to sort of do what you want. In some cultures, it's very tightly restricted, and sexuality is only expressed in certain situations or barely at all. And so there's differences around the world, and what I was trying to suggest to you here is that often the pattern we see in many cultures around the world is that the rules around sexuality and sexual behavior are different for men and women, and men in particular have either fewer rules, or the punishments for breaking the rules are often less. For women, the rules are often more strict, and if women break the rules, the punishments are more strict as well. And I think we could probably all agree that is generally true. I think, even though we're from different cultures around the world, basically every culture around the world has an inequality between men and women, and men are the dominant group. Some countries there's a big inequality, some countries there's a smaller inequality, but that pattern persists pretty much globally, which actually we can talk about in just a few minutes. So to do with this control of sexuality, sorry, I'm just going to jump ahead here. I asked you at the end of yesterday's class to watch this video by Christopher Ryan. And Christopher Ryan, like I mentioned, is a psychologist. He wrote this book a number of years ago called Sex at Dawn, and he's talking about the history of human sexuality according to his research. And so let me just ask you this. What is human? Whoops, sorry, typo. What is human sexuality for? What is its purpose? Why do humans want to have sex with other humans? That's the question. Because they do, but why? This is a bit of an anthropological question, and actually this video and this sort of section is something I borrowed from my anthropology course that I teach sometimes. So, what is human sexuality for, and what is its purpose? So Karen says, it creates emotional bonds. That's interesting. Okay, creates emotional bonds. What else? What else is human sexuality for? What else is human sexuality for? Baha says, to make connections with other genders. Yeah, so it is both of these, Karen and Baha are saying that it's a bonding device, right? It's a way that humans form social bonds with each other. What else? What else? There's 8 more of you out there. So yeah, none of us would be here. None of us would be here if it wasn't for this, right? So yeah, humans do reproduce this way, right? So in part, at least in part, human sexuality is meant to help humans reproduce, right? That's important for our species. Yeah, it's enjoyable, right? So it's not in this video. I have another video. Many animals don't really enjoy sexual activity the way we do. If you watch many animals in the wild, they have sex and they just kind of go boom, 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 and then they're done. Neither animal seems to really find it that interesting, and then they just kind of wander off. And so humans are physiologically wired to enjoy sex a lot more than most animals do, and that's an important difference. Casey says can be a form of classifying people. I guess so. Like if you're thinking about who people are attracted to, like sort of heterosexual or homosexual people, or gay or lesbian identities. Yeah, sexuality is a way in which we differentiate people in societies. That's very true. Yeah, it's healthy. It's good for you, right? It's physiologically good for you. Okay. Okay, this is all good. So let me see what I've got. Oh yeah, that was that. So where Christopher Ryan started, and I'll just remind you of this, is that he was talking about a standard narrative of human sexuality. And so the idea, he said, was that historically human sexuality was about an exchange between men and women, right? And so he said thousands of years ago, when we were hunter-gatherers, men provided food and shelter and protection because we're so big and strong and we're such good hunters, and women, of course, needed those things, and so they promised to just have sex with that one guy, and then the man would give them food and shelter and protection, right? So this sort of standard narrative of human sexuality was about a bit of an exchange, right? Women promised only to have sex with that one guy, and that guy in turn promised to hunt for the woman and the children and shelter them and protect them, right? That was this kind of classic story of human sexuality. It was an exchange. It was a trade, if you will. But Christopher Ryan goes on to mention that actually doesn't make any sense given what we know about hunter-gatherers today. Hunter-gatherers don't work that way. Hunter-gatherers share everything. And we've talked about this a little bit in comparative cultures, if you recall. Hunter-gatherers or foragers share all of their food and really don't have any sort of conception of private property. There's no such thing as, your stuff or my stuff. There's no such thing as your food or my food. Hunter-gatherers share everything, right? And so this idea of, a woman needing a man to provide them with food and shelter doesn't make any sense given what we know about hunter-gatherers. Everybody is taken care of in a hunter-gatherer group. Everyone is fed by everyone else. Everyone shares. So this standard narrative doesn't really make any sense. And so, well, that's the thing, right? That's kind of where Christopher Ryan is going. And so he's saying that, if hunter-gatherers share objects, right, like so tools or whatever, and if they share food, then why would they suddenly become so possessive of people in a sexual way, right? Because if you can't own stuff, and if you can't own food, and if you can't own land, well, you can't own people either, right? You don't have exclusive rights to people. And so here's kind of where he went with it. So first of all, he compared us to apes because we are apes. Sorry if you don't want to hear that, but you're all a bunch of apes out there. So am I. We're all apes. And Christopher Ryan asked the question, what kind of ape are we? And so he looked at a few things, right? He looked at female copulatory behavior. So do female apes make a lot of noise when they have sex? He looked at the presence or absence of external testicles. And he looked at the ability of females for intercourse or estrus. And so if you know anything about some mammals, you'll know that some mammals are only in heat, or they're only interested in females, I should say. Female animals are only interested in breeding for a very short time, right? So if you look at dogs, for instance, maybe only twice a year they're in heat and they're interested in mating with other dogs. Some animals are only in heat once a year, but human beings they don't have a time of year like that human women can have sex all the time and might be interested in it. So he showed us this neat little chart which compares quite a few things in terms of us and our closest ancestors. And what he kind of found out is that we are much more similar to chimps and bonobos than we are to gorillas and to orangutans. And chimps and bonobos are apes that have flexible social systems where a female will have sex with multiple other males. With gibbons, for instance, gibbons are monogamous. And so two gibbons get together, a female and a male gibbon, and they're kind of married. They pair bond and they stay together and they don't have sex with any other gibbons. They're kind of a husband and wife sort of thing. If you look at gorillas have harems, right? So there's one big scary male. He has a group of females that sort of travel around with him, and he fights off other males and makes sure that none of the other males mate with his females, right? But humans, Christopher Ryan says, aren't really like either of those things. Humans are more like chimps and specifically more like bonobos. And those animals have flexible sexual relationships, right? And so particularly bonobos, if you don't know what a bonobo is, that's a bonobo. They're very similar to chimpanzees. They're even more similar to us than chimpanzees are. They're definitely the closest, genetically they're the closest thing to us that exists. And so these bonobos, um, they use sex to establish and maintain social relationships within the group. And so there's kind of lots of sex going on. There's no clear pair bonding like we see in gibbons. There's no harem situation like we see with gorillas or baboons. Um, Bonobos have kind of flexible social systems, and sex is a way that they kind of establish relationships and bond with each other. Yeah, it's cute, right? And so Christopher Ryan is saying here that this earlier form of human sexuality, where women trade their sexual fidelity, so the idea that they won't have sex with any other men, that they trade that for food and shelter, it doesn't really make any sense based on what we know about human beings. And so, again, this is exactly Baha's comment, right? Is that foragers use generalized reciprocity, so they share everything. So why does a woman need a man to share or to get food and shelter? And so this is kind of what Christopher Ryan comes up with. He says that in the past, he suggests that our foraging ancestors, so these are people who lived before farming, at least 10,000 years ago and more, he says that our foraging ancestors probably had multiple sexual relationships going at any one time. And so he's not saying that nobody ever got married. He's not saying that nobody ever pair bonded and sort of only wanted to have sex with one other person. He's not saying that that didn't happen. He's saying that in general, this is the way humans are wired, right? This is our sort of default setting, is that for humans, our sexuality is a means to create and maintain social relationships. And really only second is it a way to have babies, right? So our sexual behavior and our sort of desire to have sex is not just about making more humans, right? There's actually something else that's more important. At least that's what Christopher Ryan is saying. Now, he says a couple of other things here that are interesting and I wanted to highlight. He said something at one point, and I don't know if you remember, but he said something about males in some societies feel that they can or that they should monitor or control women's sexual behavior. So he said that. And he also said that women's sexuality had become conflated with property rights. By the way, if you want to sound really smart, use the word conflated. It's a really fancy word, and if you use it correctly, it will make you sound super intelligent. See, I used it. Don't I seem more intelligent now? So he said these two things, right? That men feel that they should monitor and control women's sexual behavior, and women's sexuality had become conflated or sort of combined with property rights. Now, again, if you look cross-culturally, if you look at people who hunt and gather, and if you look at people who practice simple farming in order to get their food, you'll see that there is generally more equality between men and women. Okay, and so in these types of societies, in these types of cultures, there's more equality between men and women. If there's a marriage, both men and women enter into it freely. In many cases, they can divorce, and men or women can divorce their husband or wife without kind of any difference. And particularly with foragers, you see that they're not very concerned about who the father of a child is. Because again, hunter-gatherers kind of live in a group, they raise their kids as a group, and so, it's just not that important who the father is, because kids are kind of raised a little bit by everyone, right? Yes, you have your mom, yes, you have your dad, but you also have a collection of other people around you who are very close to you, and sort of love you and take care of you, and so you've always got a group of adults looking after you in a hunting and gathering situation. So, but when we look at agricultural communities, so when we look at people who are practicing intensive farming, um, we frequently find that these societies are less equal. Okay, and so men hold more power. We usually find there's less flexibility in marriage or divorce, and so um, marriages might be arranged, divorces might not be allowed at all, and there's usually strong concern about the parentage of a child. And I think some of these things came up yesterday when we talked about how women needed to be pure, right? Or they needed to be virgins before their wedding, right? So we usually see that in societies that are agricultural or in societies that were agricultural. And so I'm saying that about Western civilization here because we're not really an agricultural society anymore, but we used to be. We came from it. So why the difference? And this is what I'm going to this is the argument I'm going to make for why men and women are often not equal and why men are often the dominant group in societies around the world, okay? So we said that hunter-gatherers, people who don't farm, who hunt and gather for their food, they usually don't own land. Sorry. They really have no conception of ownership. Again, there's no my stuff and your stuff. There's no my food and your food. And the land is not owned either, right? It's for most hunter-gatherers, they belong to the land. They're a part of it. The land takes care of them. But for people who farm, they often do have a conception of land ownership, right? And so I think most of us come from societies where, yeah, you can own land, right? You can buy a section of land. They'll give you a deed, a piece of paper from the bank saying you own this piece of land. You can sell it to someone else. They can sell it to someone else. Land can be owned, right? And so this is much more common of agricultural communities that farm. And so the other thing we see is that agricultural societies are often patrilineal. And so that means that the family you belong to is the one that's associated with your father's side. And so there's a few differences here. This is a bit of an anthropological thing, which I don't want to go into. But usually agricultural societies, the father's side of the family is more important, right? And so you might inherit things through your father's side of the family. Your father's relatives might be more important in your sort of family life. That's where names are inherited from in many cases, right? So my last name is my last name because it was my father's last name and it was his father's last name, right? So we kind of, even here in the West, where my mother's side of the family and my father's side of the family are both equal in terms of who belongs in my family, we still see evidence of the fact that in the past the father's side of the family was more important because, again, that's how names get passed down, at least in the West anyway, but in many other countries as well. So there's two things going on here. Land is owned, and inheritances come through the father's side of the family, right? So fathers pass their land and their wealth down to their sons, okay? So what starts to happen over time is that if men want to pass down their wealth to their own child, then they have to make sure that their child is actually theirs, right? I don't want to pass my land. If I'm a farmer, I don't want to pass my land and my wealth down to to Baja's kids, right? Because let Baja pass his own land and wealth down to his kids. I want my wealth to go to my kids, right? But how do I do that thousands of years ago, right? How do I make sure that my son is actually my son? How do I do that? There's no DNA test, right? I can't do that. How do I do it? Well, I control the sexual behavior of my wife and of women in general, right? We make sure that women don't have sex before marriage, make sure that they are virgins. And then once they get married to a guy, we make sure that they don't have sex with any other guys, right? And if you can do that, if you can control women's sexuality to that degree, then you can ensure that your child is actually yours. And when you pass on your land and your wealth, you can be sure that it's going to your child and not some other guy's child, right? Now, this is kind of what Christopher Ryan is talking about when he says that, when he says both things, right? When he says that men feel they have some right to monitor and control women's sexual behavior, in many cases and in many societies, it goes all the way back to this idea of land inheritance, okay? And so I think yesterday I pointed out that, if a guy is really successful with women and he sort of has lots of sexual relationships, often he gets called, cool names like a playboy or a Casanova or a stud or whatever. He gets lots of cool names. His male friends are high-fiving him all over the place. But if a woman acts the same way, if she has lots of sexual partners, she gets called a lot of ugly, hurtful words, right? There aren't really any cool words for women for that type of behavior. And the reason why is that it goes all the way back to a time when women's sexual behavior was tightly controlled in order to make sure that children were legitimate, that they actually belonged to their father, so that they could pass down land. And so we kind of see evidence of this in various societies to various degrees. Again, here in the West, the inheritance thing doesn't matter anymore, right? Like, most of us aren't farmers. You can leave your you can leave your land or your inheritance to whoever you want. I can leave my inheritance to my cat if I want to. It doesn't matter. But still, even in the West here, we have this remaining double standard about what men are allowed to do and what women are allowed to do. And it goes back to this sort of earlier phase of society, at least in the West. So Christopher Ryan says that men often have this desire to control or monitor women's sexual behavior, and if they don't approve of women's sexual behavior, that they can do something about it, right? And so in some societies and some cultures, the actions that are taken are very severe. There's very severe punishments for improper sexual behavior. Here in the West, there are not, but still sometimes hurtful words are used to refer to women who still don't follow these traditional rules, right? And Christopher Ryan also said that women's sexuality had become attached to property rights. And again, in the past, that was because inheritance of property and wealth was, that shouldn't say continent, that should say contingent. Sometimes you'll also look really smart if you actually use the right word in the right place. Unlike that, now I don't look very smart, but contingent is the word I was looking for. On women's sexual fidelity, right? So ensuring that you can pass down your wealth and your land through the family line relies on women's sexual behavior. And so again, women's behavior becomes very tightly controlled in societies like this, and in some cases, actually, women become to be seen as property. Okay. In Canada, in the past, and I don't know when this law was removed, but in the past, you could not be tried. You couldn't actually go to jail for raping your wife. You couldn't do it. And the reasoning at the time was, well, it's your wife. How could you rape your wife, right? It's like, it's like, how could I steal my phone? It's my phone. I can't steal it, right? How could I steal my own thing? And so they were using the same rationale in the past. How could you rape your wife when your wife belongs to you? And so, again, women started to be seen as property, as things that were owned by men. Um, Fortunately, we've gone beyond that, but the inequality still persists, right? And so the ideology we're talking about here, and I'll give you a break in just 2 seconds. The overall ideology we're talking about here is patriarchy. Okay, so sort of a traditional belief that men are superior and that things that are normal or traditional or from the male perspective is the way that society should be organized. Okay. And so before I send you on break, I'll just ask you this question then. So, given the fact that we have an inequality between men and women, and given the fact that women in the past and in the present, their sexual behavior was more tightly controlled than it was for men, the interesting question that brings up is, I'm going to go back to Ariana Grande. So if she, or any other pop star really, if she performs in a very sexual way in her concerts or in her music videos, is what she is doing empowering, right? So her traditionally women's sexuality was tightly controlled, and so by her expressing her sexuality that way, is she saying, is it empowering? Is she saying, I'm in charge of my sexuality and I can act this way because I want to? Or is it not an expression of empowerment because she is being pushed by record executives to act that way in order to attract a male audience? So is her sexuality empowerment, or is her sexuality subjugation? Is she being forced to express it this way in order to sell records? I don't know the answer to that, but I'll let you think about it while we have a little break. So take a break, stretch your legs, come back in 10 minutes, and we'll move on to the video I want to show you. Okay, so see you very shortly. Okay, good people. So, what I was trying to do there is kind of paint you a bit of a picture of, I guess, the very short history of human sexuality, right? The idea that Christopher Ryan is arguing that thousands of years ago, before agriculture, before anyone farmed, there was a certain amount of equality between genders, and there was um, equality in terms of how sexuality was, the rules around sexuality, how sexuality was controlled. But when people started switching to agriculture, when they started, when they kind of invented the concept of land ownership, and when they started passing land down from father to son, that's when we start to see, and there's some other things happening there too, but when we start to see um, inequality increase between men and women, we see women's sexual behavior more tightly controlled. Men's sexual behavior is tightly controlled as well, but not as much as women. Um, and of course, it's done in order to make sure that children are legitimate, right? That the son of a father is actually, you know, his son and not some other guy's son. And so over time, that sort of evolves into a situation where women are seen as property, right? And their sexual behavior is very tightly monitored. And again, even in the West here, and I, excuse me, I don't know how, what you sort of see in your own individual countries and societies. But even here in the West, even though we've kind of moved past that, and we're in a different phase of our history now, we still see evidence of those old ideas of control of women's sexuality, um, and of women as a possession of a man. And so again, the sort of negative words that are used to describe women who, you know, do not follow sexual rules or might have multiple sexual relationships. We have lots of negative labels for them. If you've ever been to kind of a Western style wedding, or if you've seen one on TV or in the movies, um, you'll know that the bride comes from the back of the church, right? She walks in, the groom is up at the altar, the bride walks down the aisle, and her father is with her, right? And her father walks down the aisle with her. You know, he gives her a little kiss, and then she goes up to the altar to get married to the groom. And that whole process, you might know, is called giving her away, right? He's giving his daughter away. And there's a very literal meaning to that in the past, because daughters were kind of the responsibility of their fathers, and they were kind of owned by them. And so here, the father is giving his daughter to this other guy, the groom, and then he will, you know, she will become his. And so you see that kind of evidence of possession of women as property, even though that's not how we think about it anymore. The custom is still there. The other place you might see this show up, and you've probably seen this, is think of a movie or a TV show or something where two guys have a conflict over a girl, right? They both like this girl. Either maybe they went on dates with her, or maybe one guy is kind of her boyfriend and one guy kind of isn't, or whatever. Either way, two guys are interested in the same girl. So what do? The two guys fight, right? The two guys fight it out. They punch each other, or however they fight, and then whoever wins apparently gets the girl. But does it matter what she thinks? Does it matter if she's interested in one guy or the other guy, or neither of these guys? No, it doesn't matter, right? Because whoever wins the fight is going to get the girl. Because again, she's kind of, in this situation, she's kind of like a possession. She's kind of like a prize, and whoever the strongest or toughest guy is gets the prize, right? Which is, again, a very kind of retrograde idea that goes back to when women were possessions, right? Women were things to be owned by men. Yeah. Okay. I know that was kind of a lot. There was some psychology in there. There was some anthropology. There was some history. Uh, there was a lot of different things that got thrown in there that are a little bit different than some of the things we normally talk about. But is that okay? Do you have questions on that? And also, while I wait for questions, I'll say, um, Karen, you got the punchline of that yesterday. You said something about inheritance or legitimacy of children or something. I forget exactly what you said, but you kind of said exactly what I was going to, where I was going to arrive today. So good for you. Full points. Although you're not supposed to jump that far ahead of me, but good for you. That was good. What do you think? Is anybody here? Anybody alive out there? Okay, so no questions. No, no, no. No. Okay. Okay. Um, so before we go into the next thing, I wanted to just talk about a couple of things, okay? A couple of assignment things. So number one, so in the comments here or in the live stream, maybe let me know, like, thumbs up or thumbs down if when I ask you if things are okay, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down or a yes or no or something. So the first thing I'd like to do is I'd like to have another quiz on Monday on the sexism stuff. I'll figure out the exact classes that'll be included after class, and I'll post it in Microsoft Teams. But I'd like to have a quiz on Monday if I could. Yes, so quiz on Monday. The second thing is that we have two things left to do, okay? So we have a third micropaper to do, and we have a final research paper to do. And the final paper takes the place of the final exam. So there's no final exam, I'm just giving you this paper to write. And so in this paper, you're going to try to show me what you know, right? Show me that you understand this course and can think about these ideas, okay? So we have those two more things to do, but the problem is we don't have very much time left. And so once this week is over, we only have 3 weeks of class left. That's it. And so I don't think there is enough time to do both the final research paper and to do the third micro paper. And so what I'm going to suggest is that we don't do the third micro paper. Okay, so we just leave it at 2. And so my question is, and I'd like you to sort of vote on this, is that good with you or not? If we don't do the third micro paper, and on Monday or Tuesday, I simply assign you the final research paper and you can start working on that, because that one is bigger and is going to require more work and it needs to be of better quality. Okay, so I'm going to say So that's the question I'm going to ask you. Are you okay with not doing the third paper? And so Karen, I think, is giving me a thumbs up. When is it due? So the final one, I'd like it to be due on the last day of class. I think that would be really good. And then yeah, I think that's what we should try to do. So KC is okay. Rashid is good. Baha says no problem, I hope. I hope that's what NP means. I think it is, but let's see. There's other people. What do you think? Is that good? We'll just skip over that and we'll go right to the big one. That's a little bit my fault. I think I was a little bit slow in terms of assigning the first one and returning the first one to you, so that's my fault. The second one is I think it just might have been a little too much for an online course, especially since we were only 12 weeks rather than 13. I think I may have just tried to do too much, which sometimes happens. Okay, so no micropaper. 1, 2, 3, 4 people have answered. What about you other 7? Are you gonna let these 4 just decide for you? Do you not want to take part in the democratic process? Okay, I asked. So that's what we'll do. So micropaper 3 is gone. We won't do it. I will commit to returning the second micropaper to you and your marks by Monday so that I can assign you the final one on Tuesday and you'll kind of know where you sit. The final paper is again going to be a little bit bigger and it's going to be a little more complicated. Yeah. Exactly. It's going to be a little bigger, a little more complicated. I will want to see more things from you in that paper. But again, you'll have more time to work on it. I may be able to give you some class time as well. We'll see how that goes in the next few weeks. But we'll have that due on the last day of class. And then, of course, once that's done, you can just worry about your other final exams, which I think will be the week after. So I think that's what we should do. Okay. Good. Okay. Right. So now I have a video that I want to show you called What Stands in the Way of Women Being Equal to Men. And so it's a little BBC documentary and it kind of goes around the world and talks to 4 or 5, I think 5 young women. They're all about 15, 16, 17 years old. Talks to them about their experience of being a woman in their own country and how they feel, I guess generally how they feel about being a young woman in their culture. And so I have a few questions that I want to ask you, and I'm going to post them in Microsoft Teams right now. And so in Microsoft Teams, there is the video link and the questions. And so I think what I'd like to ask you to do is let's go to Microsoft Teams, watch the video, answer the questions kind of as best you can based on what you see. And maybe let's just watch the first 15 minutes of the video. And then we'll come back here and then we'll just talk about what we've seen, okay? Yeah, so I'll let you do that. Go to Microsoft Teams, click on the link, Watch the first 15 minutes, 15 minutes, then come back here and we'll talk a little bit, okay? So go ahead, enjoy. See you in 15. Okay, people. So hopefully you're done watching the first 15 minutes of that. Um, so yeah, we have a little BBC documentary here, and we're speaking to, I think, four young women from around the world. Right? We meet Vigdis from Iceland. We meet Shway Shway from Lesotho. We meet Lulu from the UK, and we meet Mira from Jordan. Right? So four young women that we're interviewing here. And so, very quickly, what kind of things do we hear about? What kind of things do we hear from these girls about messages about boys and girls and men and women? What kind of things do they say, these girls? Okay, so KC says women are always expected to have a good reputation and play their role because that is what society is used to. Yeah, um, I think that Mira is the one who says the thing about the good reputation, right? But it seems that all of those girls are talking about pressure about how people see them, right? Um, are they good girls, right? Do they follow the rules? Do they observe proper cultural and do they observe proper sexual behavior as their culture defines it, right? So these girls are feeling a lot of pressure to be who they're supposed to be, right? To be good girls, whatever that whatever good girls means in a particular society, right? Yeah, and they do ask that question, right? They say, why do men have why don't women have the same opportunities as men, right? That's the question that all of these young girls are asking, and of course it's the question that's kind of hanging over this documentary here. um, yeah. So James says, I think women want and can do anything men do, and men should do. Yeah, and and I think, and I agree with you. I agree with you there, Jimmy. Is that yeah? I think women should be able to do what they want to do, and men should help out women with the things that they are generally the work that generally falls to them. But of course, the question is why, right? Why does this not seem to happen in really all cultures around the world? Baha says they want to act like boys, but they just think about going out and playing sports, not in terms of spending the whole day working under the sun. Uh, that is true, right? So, what can I say about that? I guess the question I would ask you there is, why do some people have to do certain things in order to have the same freedoms that others have? Okay, so why do women have to do a particular type of work in order to have freedoms that everyone else enjoys? That would be my question to you. Karen says historical and cultural influence makes people in society judge women. Yeah, so there are different cultures represented here, right? We're in different parts of the world. They have somewhat similar but somewhat different expectations about what women shouldn't do, and can and can't do. Um, but there's also a historical element to those things as well, right? And so, of course, all of those parts of the world have a different culture history, and so those historical events and patterns are going to influence how women are perceived, right? And what kind of rules they have to follow. Okay, We just have a few questions, not a few questions, we have a few minutes left. And I just have one quick question for you, because I'm gonna let you go and we'll reconvene tomorrow. But just out of curiosity, who's still here? Give me a thumbs up, or a hey, or an emoji of some kind. Who's still here? Give me a quick thumb or emoji face. Well, I know you're here still. Who's still here? Okay, yeah, I know Jimmy's here, good. Dika's here, good. Masheed's here, good. Kind of figured. Baha, you're still here, right? 2,000 years later. Eric is here, that's good. Kind of figured you were. Who else? Who's still here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's interesting because my little counter says 11. My counter says there's 11 people, which is still short of the 19 people that it should be. And so we only have 11 of 19, but of course when I ask, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of 19. Whew, that's not good. Oh, Ba's here. Because boys, especially in the Middle East, since they finish grade 6, they go to work, so their sisters do not have to do so and continue their education if their parents are not able to provide for them. We should talk about that a little bit more tomorrow, Baha. Because boys, especially in the Middle East, since they finish grade 6, they go to work, so their sisters don't have to. And so... okay. Yeah, I'm gonna remember that, and we'll come back to that tomorrow, and we'll I might ask you a few more questions about that if that's okay. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Interesting. Okay. So that's all for today, good people. Those of you who are still here, I'm glad you're still here. It's nice to have you. Those of you who aren't here, I'm wondering where you are because you should be here. But good work today. Monica's here. Hi, Monica. And Baha's. Okay. We'll dig into that tomorrow. Okay, I promise. We'll dig into it tomorrow. Yeah, you're probably right. You're probably right. Okay, yeah, we'll do our best with it tomorrow. Even though I think you're right. It's it'll be difficult to deal with it, but we'll figure it out and we'll do something with it. Okay. Okay. So that's all for today. Good work today in the live chat, and thank you for being here. Just to recap very quickly, we said that we'll have a quiz on Monday, and I'll post that in Microsoft Teams. We agreed that we're going to not do the third micropaper, and I'll post that in Teams as well. And I will assign the final paper, which will take the place of the final exam. I'll assign that to you on Tuesday. and it'll be due the last day of class, which I think is August the 6th. Yeah, that's kind of what we decided today. Okay, so I'll post that in Microsoft Teams so that it's somewhere for people who are not here. But otherwise, thank you all for being here. I hope you have a lovely rest of the day. Some of you I'll see very shortly in comparative cultures. But yeah, until tomorrow, I'll see you later, okay?